Hey, quick disclaimer going in. Partway through the video, I start saying roar instead of risk of rain. That's just ROR abbreviated for the sake of brevity. Also, spoiler warning. What does it look like to kill a god? Well, it can look like this. Or this. Ooh, or maybe something like this. Runs like this are the real meat and potatoes of Risk of Rain. You can die, and die again, but when you get that single, incredibly lucky run, it's such a rush. It reminds me of The Binding of Isaac, another roguelike with out-of-control god runs, but at the same time, Risk of Rain has never felt like those other capital R roguelikes. There's a certain je ne sais quoi that separates Risk of Rain from them in my mind, and it's hard to pin down exactly what that is, but I think it's something worth exploring. It's not just the graphics or the music, but I think the defining character of this game starts in the top right corner of the screen. Let's go back and start from the beginning. When Duncan Drummond and Paul Morse graduated from the University of Washington, they had a ton of ideas of what their first game would look like. They had a very fun-oriented game philosophy and enough elbow grease to get something made with 2012 Game Maker, with MS Paint for the artwork. MS Paint! Can you believe doing all of this on fucking MS Paint? I tried to look more into it because the only mention of this is in a PC Gamer article from 2017, where he mentions that all the previous games were done on, quote, Paint. He just casually tosses it out there. And the only art program from 2012 that I could find was MS Paint, or the only one with paint in the title at least. So I think that's what he meant. The initial version of the game was conceived as a sort of tower defense style game, with survivors protecting their crashed ship from the monsters on the planet. It quickly ran into a problem in that players were trying to game the system and exploit the design, as testers are wont to do. It was difficult to properly incentivize players to wander away from their downed ship and explore the map that was made on MS Paint, so they had to come up with a different strategy to pressure players. This led to the inclusion of a mechanic that is clever, intuitive, and perfectly guides player behavior in a deep and interesting way. Time equals difficulty. Time pressure on players is nothing new. Hell, even Super Mario Bros. Had a timer to try and push players forward and encourage speed. It's a pretty easy idea to play around with, and in certain cases it can be sort of a cheap trick to artificially create difficulty where the game design lacks. A timer is usually a tacked-on feature that serves as just another thing to glance at every so often and get frustrated by sometimes. Plus, let's be honest, who has actually run out of time in a level of Mario? I mean, come on. Hapu, however, stands out from the rest by actually using this timer as the core mechanic to design the game around. The clock is the beating heart of Risk of Rain, and every single action the player does is a choice that comes with a cost-to-benefit analysis based on those ever-ticking seconds. Underneath the clock, there's these little blocks that signify a jump in difficulty. Every time a chunk is hit, the enemies get healthier, do more damage, and are more frequent. These chunks are totally fake, by the way. They're a lie, they're a trick. Hapu wants to lie to you. Every minute, the enemies on the map get harder and harder, and these chunks don't actually correlate to that time increase. There is no easy, medium, and hard. Not really. They do this so that the difficulty curve is nice and smoothed out, because frankly, it would suck to feel like you've finally gotten a leg up on the game for the monsters to suddenly hit 20% harder. So all this begs the question, what exactly are you doing while this clock is ticking away? Well, you're beating lunch money out of lizardmen, opening chests, and trying to find missile launchers to shoot at God. You were a passenger on board the UES Contact Light, a shipping freighter that delivered a bunch of whatever the hell to different planets in the solar system. You're given an order to take a detour to a lightly explored planet called Petrichor 5, and while you're there you start taking logs of the local wildlife and basically doing space colonialism. Somehow, this guy called Providence teleports onto your ship, and for some reason I can't possibly imagine, destroys it. You land on the planet's surface in an escape pod, the contents of the freighters are scattered all around the planet, and now you have to find a way to kill God and go home. By the way, I know it sounds like a bit that I'm doing, but in the lore this guy is literally a god. Every chest costs money, some chests cost more, and every chest has a variety of over 100 different items in them. Holy shit, the item variety. I have an unhealthy amount of encyclopedic knowledge when it comes to how items work in this game, and it's even worse in the sequel. Items can work with each other, stack their effects, and some are just total dog shit. Sometimes you get a run where you're simultaneously lighting enemies on fire and making them bleed. Sometimes you get a run where you become a healing god sitting in the thick of the fight while you trade hits. And sometimes you just kinda die? The different rarity of items, ranging from common, uncommon, rare, and equipment, don't necessarily represent their actual power. For example, if I get something like a dead man's foot, I'm like, yeah, okay, I guess that's something. But if I get something like a soldier syringe, my eyes bulge out of my head and I go, auga, as steam billows out of my The real god runs come from when you get a lot of the same white item and boost your stats to an insane degree. So what about rare items and equipment? Well, rares are almost always a really good thing to get, but you only ever want one of them. Getting an ancient scepter, an item that upgrades your special ability, is super good to get in a run, but getting a second one does nothing. Getting multiple of the same item usually has diminishing returns on its effectiveness, the multiplicative scaling being a real downer when you get something like a second alien head and it doesn't give you the same value as the first one. That's not an issue for common items since you can get so many of them in a run, but for something as rare as a, well, rare item, you want to get the maximum value out of them that you can. Equipment, however, are a blight on my soul and they make me want to die. So equipment are a special item that basically gives you a fifth ability. This can be firing a barrage of homing missiles, to popping pills, to calling in the fucking squad! But they have one glaring issue. You can only carry one at a time, and their rarity sits outside of the normal rarity of the other three. This means that they can be in any chest, unless it's the guaranteed rare chest. And if you already have an equipment that you really want to hold on to, then it becomes a dead item. This is a counter incentive to exploring, and it really chafes against the kind of risk reward that the timer pushes. If you go out of your way to get that chest that you missed, you want it to be worth it. Is it going to be a good uncommon item? Maybe it's another lens maker's glasses. Oh, it's just another fucking squib. This feeling really sucks, and it's one of the main criticisms that I have when it comes to the item balancing in Risk of Rain 1. So with all that in mind, what does a god run actually look like? Well, a little bit like this. What's happening here? I'm gonna be honest, I'm not even sure myself. There's some Healy stuff going on, there's some rocket stuff going on, there's some stabby stuff going on, and that's 26 stacks of extra damage from the contract item. This is the stuff that keeps me coming back in multiple runs, like an addict trying to get his next fix and chase that high, don't do drugs. When you're so lost in the sauce that you can't imagine losing, but the difficulty is scaled so high that you're treading that line of almost dying and getting swarmed. After all of that fighting and item hoarding and traveling stage to stage to stage to stage, you've finally gotten to Providence. The last boss fight begins. Providence is proper spooky, but once you learn his patterns, he's not that hard. He has moves that seem really scary on the surface, like when he teleports to smack you or when he armors up and only takes 1 damage at a time from any source until it goes away. Once you learn the strategy of just dodge, shoot, and dodge, he can actually be kinda easy. You're probably on a god run at this point anyway, so it's not that hard to take advantage of the moments where he leaves himself open to just eat lead. The real challenge doesn't come from stage 1 or stage 2, but it's when it hits stage 3. This is the stage where attacks can start overlapping, because now you're fighting Shadow Providence alongside regular Providence. Shadow Providence has the same attacks, the same damage, and his own health bar. When one knocks you up, the other comes in to smack you down. When one is recovering from an attack, the other is denying your opening by forcing you to focus on dodging. However, this is a double-edged sword. AoE items and attacks are more effective in this stage. Attacks that bounce between enemies can be used to their full effect. Lifesteal items can get more effective with more targets to hit, and you can kill Shadow Providence. This forces the regular Providence to summon him again, creating yet another opening for you to exploit. It's a really dynamic and interesting fight, but it never feels crushingly difficult or unfair. It's a nice capstone on a good run, and it feels really satisfying when you get to press that final button and launch the ship. So what's the deal with Petrichor 5? Who are these little lizard guys, and why am I being attacked by a walking house? Well, there isn't a lot to go on in the first game. The lore we get to work with comes from the item and monster logs we can find throughout the game.
Lasting for a few days at least. From the relative safety of my drop pod, I watched as a mountain rose to its knees, pushing itself up with arms of stone and dirt and twine. The Colossus appeared as a cousin of the rock golem and share many similarities, from its red gaze to its stocky stature. Around its feet, many smaller golems rose, joining it. In what possible ways could conventional weapons help me? I've begun to find a dark humor in the absolute overkill that I face. This is simply ridiculous.
These logs paint a picture of several intelligent species, all commingling with each other on the planet. Creatures that can make armor, build temples, and some that are even intruders. From the imp logs, we find out that the imps are also aggressive to the denizens of Petrichor 5, even though in-game they only attack you. They come from a place called the Red Plain, and Providence seems pretty keen on killing them whenever he sees them. Ultimately, that's all we really know about Providence. He's protective of the denizens of the planet, destroying anything that comes near that he sees as a threat. He's fast, powerful, and not only commands worship from the intelligent life, but can directly command the less intelligent life, like his two gilded worms. When we kill him, our character feels that they've made a, quote, terrible mistake, and the music perfectly reflects that. The music while fighting Providence is this low, grungy, angry combat music, but the music in the stage leading up to him is what I'm much more interested in. It begins as a slow, lone keyboard plinking out the Risk of Rain motif. The piece slowly rises in complexity, layers stacking on top of that ever-progressing keyboard, and it creates this growing feeling in your chest that you're building to something final. More intensity, more layers, and the song ends on this absolutely insane guitar solo. It's this building complexity and intensity that marches forward unceasingly that makes the track perfectly mirror your journey throughout the game. The stronger you get, the harder the enemies get. It's all layers on layers despite the incredibly simple beginning. The way the song ends, that emotionally charged and almost angry guitar just screaming out into the piece, it makes that terrible mistake feel so very tangible. Even if you can't pinpoint why it feels heartbreaking, it feels aptly like a coalescence of your journey. I want to take a minute to talk about Chris Christodoulou, the game's composer and a man whose name feels specifically designed to fuck with me. I did a not insignificant amount of research to make sure I got that name right, and I'm still not confident. Something that surprised me when learning about him was how simultaneously closely and independently he worked with the team at Hapu. Often he would send demo tracks to Hapu that turned into full songs later on. Sometimes he would get feedback and change finished pieces to better fit the game, and sometimes he would compose a specific kind of song at their request. A good example of this is the first track, Risk of Rain.
This is the first track. It's called Risk of Rain, and as you can imagine, I didn't have to think too hard about the title.
In his album commentary, he describes how he made the track before the Kickstarter was even launched, and he got feedback that moving forward they would need something more action-packed. He got inspiration for this piece not from the game, but from the color palette. The pastel purples and dark tans gave him this kind of inspiration for a darker, more ambient piece. Moving forward from that, the song Dew Point is immediately more upbeat and energetic. He started leaning heavier into chiptune sounds that better fit the style of the game, and it makes the soundtrack identify more with an older era of video games. It's so nice to hear him talk about how much fun he had working on the soundtrack. He just, as he so puts it, can't help himself but put solos in almost every single song in the game. There's a ton of references to different pieces of music in his work. He talks about how he plays with time signatures and polyphonics, and it all just reads as a music nerd getting paid to put all of his skills to use in whatever way he wanted. Not to mention the names are all Chris. Okay, so we got a bunch of references to rain and weather stuff. Yeah, that tracks. Double fucking rainbow. Okay. What's this? 25.3 north by 91.7 east. What is that? Okay, Chris. Okay! A particular point of interest for me with Chris's music was just how often he used that Risk of Rain motif. He crams it into basically every single song in one form or another, be it distorted, ascending, descending, or even inverted. There's a different feel to each level for sure, and Chris seems to be especially good at bringing a vibe and a texture to every song. But that recurring motif does a really good job at creating a musical cohesion that makes every stage feel like it belongs. I really think that shows a high degree of skill on Chris's part, since he didn't make a single song in this game for a specific stage. Hapu just got all of these songs into their library and decided where to put them in the game without Chris's input, including Coalescence. That building culmination, which perfectly mirrors the game and punctuates the feelings of the story, wasn't even an intentional choice. It shows just how well he can use music to create a certain feeling, and it shows a great deal of planning and forethought by Hapu to put that track where it was. If it wasn't for the album commentary, I would have been absolutely certain that was a fully intentional choice. And it blows my mind that these creators had this kind of chemistry. If you're a music nerd, Chris's album commentaries for 1 and 2 are an absolute treat to listen to. Plus, you'd get a lot more out of them than I did, since I understand maybe half of whatever the hell he was talking about. Whew, so that's Risk of Rain 1. It's an incredibly deep, musically interesting, masterfully designed game with only a couple of rough edges. It's a really strong start for Hapu as their first game, and a really good basis for the sequel, and crap. I forgot to talk about the artifacts. Okay, really quickly, I want to talk about the artifacts. Artifacts are particularly interesting and lend a lot of replayability to the game. They are extra modifiers that you can add to your run to give it just that little bit of extra spice. I don't want to get too into what every single one of them does, so if you're just listening to the video, now is a good moment to tune back in. We've got Hard Mode, Copy Paste, the one that cuts off your hands. The appropriately named Artifact of Spite, the one that kills you. Slot Machine Bullshit, E-Boy Invasion, Panic, 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 and my two favorite, the Artifact of Sacrifice and the Artifact of Command. Audio listeners, you can put your phone back in your pocket now, it's fine. These two have the most impact on the game, especially when used together. Sacrifice just means that instead of running around and buying chests, you're getting all your items from killing enemies and praying that they drop them. This means you never actually have to spend money again, since there are no chests, no shrines, and no multi-shop terminals. This also means that you can just hoard money for stuff like Golden Gun or Gold-Plated Bomb, which becomes such a good item when money is no object. My favorite thing to do is to just stay on stage 1 for like 35 minutes and just become super overpowered so I can blast through the rest of the run. The best way to do that is when you also use the artifact of command. Command just lets you choose your items. It's incredibly overpowered, and that's what makes it so fun to use. Suddenly you can do specific builds like super crit or mega healing. My personal favorite is the death by a billion barbed wires build, where you stack barbed wire, and you stack barbed wire, and you stack barbed wire, and you stack. Being able to actually make a build for your character instead of just taking what comes your way is a really fun way to play the game, and it totally consumed younger me for a while. I was playing Huntress basically non-stop, and it got to the point where I had a written down list of items to get in what order for maximizing my damage. This is actually where a lot of that encyclopedic knowledge comes in, as younger me scoured the wiki to calculate the best build for the most damage, healing, and crit that I could. That's how I beat Monsoon, the hardest difficulty, for the first time, and to this day, command runs are just a really fun way to kill some time. Alright, I think that about covers Risky Rain 1. Now let's go on to... So imagine you're me back in 2017. I had largely moved on from Risk of Rain, and smiled whenever I scrolled past it in my Steam library. I was also knee-deep in League of Legends, so my taste had clearly taken a sharp nosedive. Somewhere, I see the words Risk of Rain 2 while scrolling online, and my heart jumps clean out of my chest. A frantic Google search sends me somewhere I can't remember, and I start seeing pictures like this. Seeing them transition from 2D to 3D made me flip my shit. Suddenly, this little indie game that I barely saw anyone talk about before was getting hype, articles, and it was being completely rebuilt from the ground up. I remember my first question being, what are they going to do to Huntress now that everyone can move and shoot at the same time? A million questions went through my mind, and it wasn't until I saw the promise of something more that I realized how much I loved Risk of Rain in the first place. The moment that early access dropped on March 27th, 2019, I was there and ready to drown in the experience. And boy, howdy was it chunky. Going back and playing the day 1 early access was such a trip. I've been so used to present Risk of Rain 2 that I completely forgot how long it took to get there. There wasn't even a final level in the early access release. Not just no final boss, but an entire missing final level. The scaling of difficulty and chest prices were all kinds of fucked up. There was placeholder ability icons, there was very limited number of items to get, and yet, I was so hooked. This was, in fact, an early access. I had to be charitable and assume that they would deliver on their promise of a full, complete Risk of Rain experience. And you know what? Things were actually looking really good. We had Dev Thoughts number 1 only 3 days later, and seeing this kind of transparency on the part of Hapu was not only refreshing, but exciting. I want to make something crystal clear. When most games label themselves as early access, there's a few things that come to mind, at least for me. This is a quick cash grab that will never get finished, or they're using early access to mask the fact that their game just isn't good. Roar 2 wasn't any of that. It wasn't any half-baked cash grab trying to capitalize on nostalgia, or a lazy, uninspired copy-paste sequel, or some kind of Overwatch 2 situation. Hapu looked at their original design and thought, what did we get right? What can we make even better? How do we expand on the things that succeeded? And it turns out, the most impactful and obvious way was adding a third access. There are a lot of things that they did in the sequel that are significant, but first let me address the 3D spinning elephant in the room. So why 3D? When I think of games that tried to transition from 2D to 3D, I often recall horror stories. Developers that didn't think about how the expanded space will affect the core gameplay, or weren't prepared to learn how to work with 3D programs. Sonic. I think of Sonic. And Mortal Kombat. Game history is riddled with examples of why this technical leap is a pretty rough one, if not an outright bad idea. So why take the risk at all? Well, after the success of Roar 1, people would draw fan art of the game and its characters, and that fan art often had items that you could pick up attached to them in some way. Makes sense. That's how the cover art does it, at least. What with the ukulele and the alien head and some goo? Plus, it gives the artist some personal flair that they can add, like if they had a really great run and they wanted to draw the items that got them there. Paul and Duncan really liked that idea, and they really wanted to implement that into the sequel.
Something I personally wanted was to be able to display items on your body. This was a key part of a lot of the fan art that I saw, and also the cover art. Doing that in 2D was actually fairly difficult. It's just sprites. So we went from 2D to 2.5D, just for the sake of being able to place those items on your body more easily. And by the time we were at 2.5D, we were like, we're almost at 3D at this point. Should we just give it a shot?
So how does this affect gameplay? Well, the first and most obvious difference is that the game becomes a lot more movement focused. Where Roar 1 was much more worried about positioning, dodging, platforming, and using openings when you can get them, Roar 2 tests a whole new set of skills just by the nature of the third axis. It would make no sense in a 3D game for your character to stop, shoot, move, stop, shoot like they do in the first game. It would feel way too clunky, and now that you aren't looking at the entire area around you at all times, it would leave you open to attacks from behind. Now every character can jump, shoot, twist, and sprint all the same. Instead of a test of positioning and timing, the game tests aim and kiting. Movement abilities have been massively tweaked for 3D spaces. Bandit, who would be added later, has smoke bombs that give him a little boost in the air, acting as small extra jumps and killing your momentum during falls. Commando can use his dodge roll just like in the first game, but now he can use it to help scale certain terrain or clear gaps. So what about Huntress? Her entire gimmick in Roar 1 was that she could move and shoot at the same time. Well, not only can she now sprint and shoot at the same time, but she has an auto lock-on for all of her basic and secondary attacks. This obviously cuts aim out of the equation, but it has even more implications than that. It's a sort of DPS buff now that you know for a fact that no shot goes to waste. It also allows you to do quick snapshots in the heat of a tough fight, and all of her abilities aside from her basic attack now also stop her falling momentum. They took the movement character and still managed to make her stand out in a game that's now all about movement. Aside from Mercenary with his 3 dashes, but shh, let me have this one, just let me have this. There are a few other things that only work now that the game is in 3D. The multi-shop terminals actually work now. In Roar 1, they could spawn in a way that all 3 options just sat on top of each other, so you had no way to actually choose the item you wanted. Now that you actually have space, that problem is impossible. Now they just fall off of cliffs if you're unlucky. The teleporter has a constricted zone now, so you have to stay inside of it to charge it. This is a really good way of making sure the player stays in the thick of the fight during boss battles, instead of just fucking off to the other side of the map and waiting. But it doesn't force the player to stay in the zone if they think it'll get them killed. Moving out of the zone to heal up or dodge an attack is fine, it just pauses the charge. There are plenty more things that have been changed, but I'll drop that here so we don't just read off a sheet of facts for 3 hours. As the game evolved and more things were added over time, we finally got this, it's such a beautiful roadmap, I'm talking new survivors, new stages, the update that hates you, and at the end of it all, the coveted final boss update. I want to go into more detail with this final level and final boss, because this was the update that really sold me on the value of this game. Let's work backwards and start with the current version of the final level, so I can more thoroughly explore what it does well. Let's start with one of the core tenets of Roar 2, one of the things that the devs put a huge amount of emphasis on when they were working on the sequel: player choice. This part of the design philosophy trickles down into almost every facet of the gameplay. My favorite example of this comes from an interview with Game Developer where the devs talk about the Monster Tooth item. This item makes it so that when you kill an enemy, they drop this little healing orb on the ground, and you can walk over and slurp it up. Hapu specifically made the healing orb drop so that players have to navigate the 3D space, but it also means that they can leave them lying on the ground and come back for them when they need a pick-me-up. It's a simple yet elegantly designed item, especially since they could have just made it instantly heal the player, like it did in the first game. The final level really leans into this idea in more obvious and subtle ways. You're tasked with charging 4 different pillars, and these pillars have varying effects like sapping your health or getting smaller as they charge. The level typically spawns with more pillars than you need, so it's up to you to choose which ones you want to deal with and which ones you would rather leave to your friends. Once you get 4, you get a zoop up to the boss platform where you fight Providence. Wait, hold on, I messed this one up. Mithrix! Mithrix is such an amazing boss fight. He's fast, he's scary, and he is constantly a threat, no matter how powerful you might feel. He is the tankiest enemy you've encountered by far, by a wide margin, and he has a move that makes him untargetable by jumping high into the sky. Not only does this give Mithrix a moment of safety, but it also resets any debuffs he might have like bleed or poison. Bleed can be proper overpowered if you get your hands on it, since it stacks infinitely. So having him just say no can result in a huge chunk of your damage just vanishing. However, this also gives the player a moment to breathe and maybe snag a heal. And if you're used to the timing, you can hit him the moment he lands back into the center of the arena for free damage. These little resets draw the fight out longer and help to make it feel more like a proper battle, but it's not so frequent that they kill the pacing of the fight. Mithrix is also a multi-phase fight, and just like Providence, it goes boss, minions, and then stronger boss. If Mithrix Phase 1 is strong, then Mithrix Phase 3 is proper terrifying. All of his attacks are stronger, often adding shockwaves or these damage pillars that can all hit you at once. You can be the strongest, meanest bastard this side of Petrichor, and Mithrix will still bonk your ass back to Roar 1. He still gets the resets, but now they're even more stilted in his favor, since you're going to need every bit of damage that you can get. Having a bunch of debuffs just cleanse off of him halfway through this phase is genuinely so tense, because stacking them while dodging all of this is a lot to worry about at once. This isn't even the worst attack he has. His worst attack is the pizza move that just kills you at higher difficulties. Major spoiler moving forward, so skip to this timestamp if you don't want the ending spoiled. Finally, after dodging, sweating, and having Mithrix shit talk you in chat for several minutes, he lies broken and dying in front of you. Take a nice, deep breath, and let's get out of what is he doing. Oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god. The first time this happened to me, I fucking panicked. Having Mithrix steal all of the player's items is an incredible trick for so many reasons. Firstly, if you're a returning fan of the first game, like I was, it does an excellent job of just knocking the stool out from under you. There are some parallels to the Providence fight, mainly the phase structure, so they used the language of Roar 1's design to guide you into thinking that there are only 3 phases. You see him on his hands and knees, he's showing signs of damage, and he's pretty clearly on death's door, and then BAM! This misdirection works for new players as well, but there's less layers of deception at play here. Not to mention, it's quite common for other games that have multi-phase boss fights to stop at 3 phases. There is a subtler trick to this phase as well, and it brings us back to the player choice. The first time you get to this phase as a new player, it's a big surprise for sure, but it also recontextualizes every single run you will have in the future. When you see an item on the ground, you're more likely to think, how will Mithrix use this to kill me? My favorite example of this is the Symbiotic Scorpion item, which makes it so that every time you hit an enemy, you reduce their armor permanently. It's an incredibly powerful item, and Mithrix loves it. His resets where he jumps into the sky might not remove the stacking debuff, but advancing in phases does. You cannot get full use out of this item because you're effectively fighting 3 different bosses with 3 different health bars. However, you can't get rid of the armor reduction unless you complete the level, so even if you kill him in this last phase, you can easily die in the run back to your escape ship. This really pushes the idea of player choice to its limit, because in a way, you're asking yourself every time you pick up a new item, will this kill me? There is a way around this, and that's picking a good orange item to take into the fight, since Mithrix doesn't steal those. This means stuff like the long-range zap of the Royal Capacitor or the homing missile barrage of the disposable missile launcher become invaluable tools since they let you deal damage from a safe distance and behind cover. This fight, and this phase more so, do a really good job of rewarding player knowledge as well as their mechanical skill. Welcome back! So now that we know what the final level does well, let's rewind the clock and take a look at how this level was released on day 1 of the official launch. You spawn into the same room, run up and out, and it's just a hallway to the boss. This was admittedly a little disappointing at the time, but I still remember it very fondly because of a specific memory I have. It's mid-August 2020. I had been having fun with the game, following along its various updates and waiting a long time for this final level update. I wanted to see if I was going to fight Providence again and what the new stage would be like. And when I teleported into this final stage, I remember being so excited to see all the new stuff. What I was not ready for was the music. The slow, somber piano sets the stage for a long walk to the final fight. Nothing but those lonely tones and the humming of my jetpack as I sprinted headlong into the level. And then I heard it. I recognized the motif immediately, and I had to just stop and listen. I was flooded with nostalgic memories of old friends and old challenges, how the first game made me feel and reflect on what killing Providence really meant to the story of the first game. And then the guitar hit. I cried, and I'm not afraid to admit that over 3 years later, I still cry. Even while writing this script and listening again. Chris was the only man for the job with this soundtrack, and by God, he nailed it. The absolute emotion and power that comes through in this song, the meaning he conveys in a pair of songs with no words, makes this one of the most compelling pieces of art I've ever experienced. Not only is it just emotionally resonant in a way that only music really can be, but in terms of technical skill, this song is right up there with Chris's best work. I'm not the only one who's had this exact experience. Looking through the comments of the YouTube upload shows plenty of people who have had the same experience and lavishing this song with well-deserved praise. There's one, though, that has always stood out to me, and this single comment has completely recontextualized how I view not just this song, but Coalescence as well. Someone commented on Coalescence a long while back, calling it the sound of realizing there's blood on your hands. I feel like this is the sound of realizing the blood on your hands will never wash away. These two ending tracks, Coalescence and Con Latitud Poderosa, are perfect examples of how context can influence how we perceive art. The placement of both of these songs, whether accidental like the first game or deliberate like the second, play a huge role in the impacts these songs have. Chris has been very active in the comments of his music, responding to fans and even leaning into some of them with quips and jokes. The kind of jokes you'd expect from somebody who named a song, "A Glacier Eventually Farts, and Don't You Listen to the Song of Life." What a weird song name. If you want to know why he named it that, by the way, go listen to the album commentary, please. I beg you, they're so good. Just go listen.
To be honest, it's probably the best title ever used in any piece of music.
That last comment about blood on your hands has done a lot to how I interpret these songs. It basically spelled out the feelings that were kind of just floating around in my brain. What were once some sick guitar riffs played over a somber track that made me feel something, now are some sick guitar riffs over a somber track that make me cry. Now, if you've been watching my footage here, you might be wondering what the hell is up with the names of everything in some of my footage. No, the developers did not name the Stone Titan M1A2 Abrams tank. That was me. I wanted to get into the mods at this point, but you can do all the renaming of stuff without mods. Doing this is entirely client-side, so it won't mess up online at all. It's also how you get as many lunar coins as you want. Kinda. Normally I think people would just say to Google how to do it, but I'm actually just gonna show you. If you're this far into the video, I'm sure you don't care. Okay, so to get a buttload of lunar coins, it's really easy. First thing that you want to do is you want to close Steam completely. Go down there, make sure that it's totally closed up. Then you want to open up your... Oops, I'm already there. I'm jumping ahead of myself. You want to open up your file explorer, go to your C drive, or your main drive, whatever that is. Program files 86, go down to Steam, go down to user data, then click through until you find a folder called 632360. Go to remote, user profiles, and then once you get to this document here, you're going to want to open it with a text editor, select Notepad. And we are looking for a very specific line of code in here. Or this isn't code. We're looking for a very specific line in here. Easiest way to find it is to just Control F coin. So where is it? Molten coins, collected coins, blah, blah, blah. None of these are what we want. This is what we want. We want to find this line right here. This is the line that dictates how many lunar coins you have. Right now I have 19. But if I want, let's say, it's 999 quadspillion coins, I just do this. I just do this little song and dance a lot. File save. So now we open up Steam. Fast forward. Right. I put too many. Okay, so I did too many, and I think it did an integer overflow, and defaulted to 0 coins. Son of a bitch! Okay, so apparently 9 billion coins, 10 digits, was too much for it to handle. Let's see if 999 million works. Okay, there we go. That's the maximum you can you can do. 10 digits of lunar coins. I think this is a great example of the fun first mentality on display by the devs. It would have been so easy for them to lock up the game behind weird file types that you need a special editor and some know-how to work around. But no, you can just do this with Notepad. It's not like the devs missed this either. They specifically made a meme acknowledging it, actually. Official Hapu fucking YouTube channel. Oh, it's awesome. This mentality trickles into the modding community too, where official patches included things that made modding easier based on suggestions by the community. They just actually listened to the people making the mods and worked with them, which is so rare nowadays that I'm honestly so impressed. Speaking of the mods, they're absolutely insane, and I love them. Do you want to play as Tracer? Or what about the Enforcer from the first game? Or what about a Beetle? Do you think that Monsoon difficulty, the difficulty that can make Bells one-shot you if you rest for even a second, was too easy? Introducing Typhoon difficulty, you insane masochist! Some of these are even just quality of life stuff too, like getting rid of empty chests or adding a scrapper into the lunar shop. I've used this scrapper so many times, it's my favorite mod by a long shot. I cannot overstate how valuable a thriving mod scene is to a game. Cultivating and supporting a community like this is a surefire way to keep people playing and pull in new people. I mean, take one look at Minecraft for a perfect example. Without an insane modding scene, Minecraft wouldn't be anywhere near the powerhouse it is today. You can only mine 1,000 blocks of cobblestone for so long before it gets dull. Ooh, they made the caves bigger. Back to strip mining. A thriving mod scene breathes such a breath of fresh air into a game that you're meant to replay over and over again. And it's how I've stuck with the game for over 3 years and 500 hours. You can even play modded multiplayer if you and your friend have the same mods installed. And that's pretty easy to coordinate since you can get a launcher with a catalog in it. Modding a game is usually a headache, but Risk of Rain modders really did a great job streamlining everything through thunderstore.io. No, I will not give you a step-by-step guide on how to set up mods. This time I am telling you to Google it. They set up the step-by-step for me. I followed it. You can do that too. Wow, that sounded really rude. This actually marks the end of pretty much everything I wanted to discuss with Risk of Rain as a whole for right now. As I write this part of the script, Risk of Rain Returns hasn't come out yet, and I've been waiting very patiently for them to announce a release date. Let me give you money, Hapu! My wallet is open for you, just let me give you my money! But that should do it for Risk of Rain 1 and 2. An incredible pair of games that have been major parts of my life and even reshaped how I think about art in some ways. All that's left for now is to see how Risk of Rain Returns pans out. And boy howdy, are my hopes pretty high. It's so good, 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 it's so good. Alright, no pussyfooting around. Let's dig into the new stuff. So, first things first. Just look at this game. The new art does an expert job of bridging that 10-year time gap by holding true to the original art style and modernizing the visuals. The visual cues have become clearer, the particle effects really pop, and the colors are no longer limited to the colors in 2013 MS Paint! Obviously, the updated sprites look fantastic, and one of my favorite parts of being in the game was watching the side-by-side comparisons of the old and new models in the credits. They even went as far as to demake the new enemies into retro versions of themselves, which is just cute. All of this is only for the stuff you see in-game though. Outside the game? Wow! The new intro and outro animations, the new character introductions, and just look at the art in these logs. The first Roar had a real charm to it, and they did a great job with the pixel limitations that they had. Returns, however, looks like the game they always wanted to make from the beginning. It's an absolute treat to the eyes from the moment you press start to the moment you lose another goddamn run to a teleporting crab. Great, yes, we all love a pretty game. But if this remaster was only visual, I wouldn't be singing its praises. So, let's get into the jank they fixed. Roar 1 was, and is, a really inspired game, but there's a lot of small issues that really feel like a product of their time. I've already talked about a few, but here's all the other issues that they smoothed out. They brought back equipment barrels, taking equipment out of the rest of the items' pools except for bosses. While it is a bummer to get equipment from a boss, it's not an item that you're going out of your way to get, so it doesn't really apply to my original criticism. You no longer have to clear the entire stage to advance the teleporter. This used to be just kind of annoying, like the game was artificially making you take more time to pump up the difficulty of the later stages, so I'm happy to see it go. Enemies still can't jump over small gaps, but they can climb ropes. Imagine a guy climbing a ladder! Truly, we are living in the future. Enemy pathing has been greatly improved in general. Like, some of them actually will fall off ledges to chase you now, and how the wandering vagrant no longer just sticks to you awkwardly while it eats all your shots. Also, you can move and shoot! The new characters are really fun too. I've played an unhealthy amount of Pilot, and I only have a single win on him. His big gimmick is the fact that he can deploy a parachute on command, and this gives you a really good amount of mobility for avoiding tough spots and getting around quickly. His secondary gives him some hang time and fires at a downward angle while you're gliding. Then there's also his landmines, which give him a small aerial boost when he deploys them. There is one issue I have with him though, and that's the fact that his primary doesn't also fire at an angle. You can do all this fancy air juggling and try to maximize your hang time, but since you only do a bit of burst damage in that time, you have no real incentive to do that. It feels like you're handicapping yourself by doing that, so the game pushes you into a playstyle of only using the parachute to dip in and out as a reposition tool if you want to keep up your damage. Drifter, however, is just it's just so good. Whack dudes, pick up scrap, and take advantage of the new game mechanic, temporary items. Drifter is able to print items that only last for a certain amount of time, and it gives them a unique identity among the roster. Hapu tried to bill her as this sort of support character, and she does a great job at doing that, but playing her solo is so fun because you get to hoard all the items like a dragon. This really makes an interesting gameplay loop of managing scrap, managing cooldowns, and trying to get as many items as quickly as possible. She also rewards game knowledge really well, because if you know what the items you get actually do, you can play around them and maximize their usefulness. Like, I play more aggressively and hit trade more often when I have a Tesla coil, or I'm more likely to do a hit and run strategy when I have a sacrificial dagger because I know that item will do a lot of heavy lifting for me. I could go on and on about the new stuff for the characters, but this video is already plenty long, and you really should just play it for yourself. I also don't have much to say about the music since it didn't really change at all. I'm not certain what Chris did to remaster the tracks other than clean up the sound or bring them up to modern standards. There isn't even an album commentary to shamelessly yoink ideas from for the script. But Chris has confirmed that he will be doing more of a retrospective since he already talked about all the music in the first game. Speaking of which, something I failed to mention during the Roar 1 segment was that Surface Tension was his least favorite track. I was wondering what he would do in Returns to fix that if he was so unhappy with it, but he's decided to just skip all that and just hand the track off to somebody else. Damjan, or DMJ, did an excellent job with this cover, and I love the more rock-focused vibe it has. However, they couldn't go without giving us one last Coalescence reprise. Maria Papaiolio, I really hope I got that right, a name seemingly designed to fuck with me, did a fantastic job with the vocalizations for the new Coalescence. Her and Chris really made this feel like a grand final goodbye to the series. It wavers between slow and ambient to loud and intense, with Maria's vocals fading in and out of the main focus. It's a shifting, complex, and properly emotional piece to use as a final send-off. Chris also put a few samples from weather forecasts in the song as well, which makes it a little silly and campy, but it fits Chris's sometimes less than serious personality.
A glacier eventually farts.
You may have also noticed I said vocalizations and not lyrics. That's because there are none. I love this because not only would lyrics in a Risk of Rain game feel out of place, but I also can keep my comment about eliciting emotions without using any words. There's so much to talk about, and so much to see and play with, and I didn't even touch the Providence trials, but I don't want to just sit and list out all the new stuff, because 1, that'd be boring as hell, and 2, I want to leave surprises for you when you eventually buy and play the game. They even have a feature where you can turn on the old rules from 2013, so you don't even have to buy the first game to get the experience of it. Minus the jank, of course. I think, though, that the introduction of new artists is a way for Hapu to try and ease their way out of the IP. We've seen this already before with Gearbox. They helped with development of Survivors from the Void from Roar 2, and now they own the Risk of Rain IP. Hapu seemingly wants to ease their audience into the idea of new people making Risk of Rain content, and Gearbox has already released a trailer for yet another Roar 2 DLC. Regardless of my feelings for Gearbox, I can't see Risk of Rain being anything but the things that Hapu made. Every bit of these games that Hapu touched is so clearly a labor of love, and that is the real heart and soul of these games. See, Risk of Rain was one of the first roguelikes ever. It's a grandfather to all these incredible games that came after, and Hapu didn't have this absolute mountain of precedent to work off of. They didn't have the tools, the experience, or the examples to pull from, and scarcity like that breeds innovation. That innovation led to the unique art style that inspired Chris's music, the time mechanics, that certain je ne sais quoi that makes these games stand out. Innovation like that is the very spirit of indie development, and Hapu put that spirit on proud display through their work. That work, that spirit, that is Risk of Rain. And that's something that Gearbox can't replicate, no matter how hard they try. Sure, I might play the stuff that they make for Roar 2, but my eyes are going to be on Hapu and their next project. People like them can't be stopped, and it's only a matter of time before they impress me yet again. So thank you, Hapu and Chris. Without your hard work and passion, we wouldn't have this incredible series to sink our time into. The 500 hours I spent on Roar 2, and the doubtless 100 more that I'm going to spend on Returns. Then again, I could have gone without having to learn how to pronounce Christodolo. Christodoulou? Thank you so much for watching all of that. That's definitely the longest video that I've ever made, and probably will be the longest video for quite a while. I had a lot to say about the first 2 games, not as much as I thought I did for the 3rd game, but... well, okay. I have a lot of things I would have said for the 3rd game, but I didn't want to just say all of it because that would have been boring. I want to give a special thank you to Eric's, who I would link more of his socials, but he's busy learning how to build rockets, so that's cool. And Haru, who I will link more of his socials in the description because it'll make him angry. Also, he owes us a maid stream in this coming year, so if you aren't following him on his Twitch account, what are you doing? I also want to say, I meant for this video to be done sooner. The 6 months bit in the end of the last video, that was supposed to be a joke, but it almost came true. It's dangerously close to being true, but I had an unexpected move, and with the holidays And also, it's my birthday. It's my birthday. I'm a birthday boy. It's actually my birthday. I also am wearing glasses. You wouldn't get mad at a birthday boy wearing glasses, would you? I'm taking a mini vacation, a week, to finish out this video and also to catch up on some games I've been missing out on over the holidays. The next video should not take 5.5 months, hopefully. Send me all of your prayers, please. I'm not religious, but I will take them and absorb their power. But that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. I love you all, and have a good night. And here's a quick teaser for the next video.